The sound typing has always been a hidden subtype within Pokemon ever since Generation 1, starting with Jigglypuff and its singing and ending with the newest addition of DJ Rotom and Pokopia. There are a slew of Pokemon that rely almost entirely on sound for attacking, such as Loudred, who can blow away houses with the power of sound. Primarina, who sings arias as they dramatically decimate their foes with spirit bombs of sound, or even just Flygon, who is known as the Desert Spirit thanks to the singing sound its wings make. But now, after searching through each of the regions for the soft sounds and the loud roars of every Pokemon, I can finally bring to you every hidden sound type Pokemon. Howdy there, I'm Krillin. Connecting and learning about our world through Pokemon is what we do here. It's not too late to start saying that at the beginning of videos as a phrase, but it's true. And on track here, sound type Pokemon have truly been a long hidden typing within the franchise. Unfortunately, despite everything, the sound typing has officially been doomed to stay a hidden subtype within Pokemon with the newest addition of DJ Rotom, a Pokemon taking over a stereo built just for it within Pokopia, but more on that later. And it's also not necessarily a bad thing that it's a subtype instead of an actual typing. Now, as we go through our Pokemon today, we're going to get into mating rituals, sounds that are so strong that they not only could, but will rupture your internal organs, and a little bit of culture amongst more bits of information about our world as always. So, let's get started. We can't begin without talking about the OG big singer herself, Jigglypuff. It has a large lung capacity exceeding most other Pokemon. Once it has an opponent's attention, Jigglypuff will inflate its lungs and sing a soothing and mysterious lullaby. This melody can cause anyone who listens to become sleepy. If the opponent resists falling asleep, Jigglypuff will endanger its own life by continuing to sing until it runs out of air, as it will sing until the opponent is actually asleep. Now, of course, when you speak, you sing, you make any noise with your face, mouth, hole, you are basically performing different compressions of air. Whether that be through your nose, your throat, even the use of parts of your tongue, all of this and more plays a big part in how you sound and how sound comes from your body. Continuing to make sounds until you run out of air will cause more and more stress on your body, as I will compare it to over-contracting a muscle, which it basically is at the end of the day. You're flexing too hard. You're crushing a can of soda that would then represent your lungs, you name it. And considering the strain and even damage this can cause, it should be no surprise that Jigglypuff would be putting its life in danger by doing this. It is noted that Jigglypuff can adjust the wavelength of its voice to match the brain waves of someone in deep sleep. This helps ensure drowsiness in its opponents, which is honestly kind of crazy to think about, considering that would then allow Jigglypuff to change the wavelength to then be inaudible to us consciously, but still be affected by it. A Jigglypuff could keep us in a coma for the rest of our lives, and nobody else would know about it if it was trying to sing in earnest to us. Now, it is noted its vocal range exceeds 12 octaves, but its skill depends on the individual. Its song varies by region, and it sounds like shouting in some areas, which again, no shocker there, as singing is deeply ingrained into every culture of society we have ever known. To explain that better, singing is considered a universal trait of humanity. It predates human language itself, and that shouldn't be a surprise considering singing expresses motion without words. You don't need to understand the words someone else is saying when they sing a piece meant to convey a feeling. It obviously helps to understand the lyrics, but especially when there's instruments accompanying the vocalist, you can feel joy, deep melancholy, anger, or any other emotion that you can name. And of course, this link of singing predating words will then lead us to Screamtail, our Paradox Pokemon. Screamtail is capable of levitating itself as opposed to walking. In an article from an October issue of a Culture magazine, Screamtail is described as a creature lurking somewhere in a Paldean forest, having the appearance of a Jigglypuff, but with a ferocious aggression that leads it to attack anyone who comes near. Its primitive appearance and savage nature have prompted rumors that it could be a Jigglypuff from 1 billion years ago, which not possible, literally not possible by scientific standards, especially when we look at the real history of Pokemon, but we'll get to why that's the case soon. Screamtail is named after a creature in the Scarlet Book that is described as having a distinctive tail and scream. Who would have guessed? and as seen in Pokemon Horizons, it is a poor singer compared to its contemporary relative, due to the fact that it ends up screaming loudly rather than actually singing. And now, here's something very important that I really haven't talked about in its own video, and I keep saying that I will, but I haven't, and it's that all Paradox Pokemon are past and future versions of our Pokemon, but are genetically unrelated because they were pulled from a timeline parallel to our own. In other words, Screamtail is an ancestor of Jigglypuff, but because it's from a parallel timeline, they share no actual DNA with each other whatsoever. Which would of course make us say it isn't an ancestor, but that's the point of Paradox Pokemon. All because a paradox is a statement, person, or a situation that seems contradictory, illogical, or absurd, but upon closer examination reveals a deeper, often true meaning. In addition, we can't trust the Occulture magazines as they are basically rumor magazines. They're entertainment more than fact, but of course there's going to be grains of truth within them. They're a big reference to the same type of popular magazines you might see in the real world. And the only other last bit of fun info is that other than Screamtail reminding me visually of Professor Sada, it does close its natural move list with Boom Burst, to really drive home the scream in Screamtail. It is directly translated as Soundwave Bomb, that move, and is noted to be an incredibly destructive, explosive sound that attacks everything in an area. How effective that move will actually be is dependent on the Pokemon, of course, and one day I'll just kind of sit down and maybe make that Paradox Pokemon video. I just gotta figure out what kind of twist I'm looking to put onto it, but for now, we move on. Clefairy might be a little bit of a head scratcher because sure, it has the words Clef and Fairy mashed together, but its Japanese name doesn't match up with that whatsoever, and the most that it would do is make a bunch of noise rather than sing in the moonlight as they all dance all night long. Though once again, it does get a little bit stranger considering it is so heavily associated with Metronome, a move named after a literal metronome that they even mimic with their movement. But again, the Japanese name of that is just called Wag Finger, because it just waggles its finger, somehow stimulating the brain into using nearly any move. What is it doing? Poking its brain through its big rabbit ears? No! But there is a special science behind this. All because metronomes give your brain instruction with timing and coordination down to the level of neural impulses within the brain. This has been compared to a conductor of an orchestra, and when you're the conductor and there's thousands of moves to choose from, who knows what the outcome might be? You do, but we don't. So to us it might seem random, but as we can see within the anime's first debut of metronome being used with Clefairy, a coordinated effort will result in a singular, devastating result. So it might not be as random as we think it is. This also would extend it to Clefable, who would then be an experienced conductor, becoming one of, if not the best, as it listens to the slightest cues and movements, the subtlety of those in Pianissimo as much as those in Fortissimo, the solo instruments and the collective. Unfortunately though, its hearing is so sensitive that it would rather stay very far away from others, as loud sounds will hurt its ears. But more than this, it lives up on mountains in an effort to hear its rumored loved ones that are supposed to live on the moon, as we believe. Also realize, we've had all this talk about the moon throughout the entire franchise, and we've visited entire other planets and other universes thanks to the Ultra Beasts before, but we've never stepped onto the moon in Pokemon games at all. There's like a huge culture around the moon, and tons of Pokemon moves, and even people related to it within the games, and yet we've not gone there, and now that needs to have its own video. I have one more technicality, since you might want to include Voltorb and Electrode, thanks to not only being soundproof through one of their abilities, but also because of a number of their moves often associated with them. Which, I'm actually wrong, it turns out that it used to have Sonic Boom as a move at level 4, but that's not been a thing since Generation 7 apparently. So, I mean, between Sonic Boom, Explode, the Sound Burst that we'll talk about later in results or as part of explosions, it just feels off now. And as such, I can feel my bones turning to dust, my hair graying as I sit here, talking about a time long lost to history when I feared getting blasted by Sonic Booms in early games while playing randomized Nuzlocke. And I hope that some of you feel old with me. I'm keeping this in, even though it really doesn't count anymore, and I'm moving on. Say what you will about Jynx's past, but there is one thing that holds true, and that is the idea that she would still be partially representative of Brunhilde in Wagnerian opera, the stereotypical opera singer with horned helmets, braided hair, and armor boobs. There's no other way for me to say it. I could have gone subtle, but then I don't get to say the words booby battalion, and I cannot resist. Now, Jynx has a language that sounds similar to human speech and includes several cry patterns. However, this language has yet to be deciphered. It also prefers to communicate by using dance-like movements. There are some musicians who compose songs for Jynx to sing. These rhythmic movements often cause people to dance along with it, and the Jynx and Alola are said to have wonderful, precise movements. Meanwhile, in certain parts of Galar, it has been feared and worshipped while being called the Queen of Ice, and they are said to have beautiful and delicate voices and a fan base dedicated to them. Jynx are also apparently able to extend their lips to kiss its opponents. Now, throughout the cultures, again, the singing and dancing varies, all dependent on the culture itself and where we would then find Jynx. But why does it have these different behaviors in these areas specifically? Beautiful dancing in Alola, that is denoted through precise movements, is easily tied to hula dancing, which can be highly choreographed as it tells story through the art form as it preserves history and culture alongside the use of singing or chanting. It is noted to be categorized into Kahiko for ancient and percussive, or Alana for modern and melodic. I apologize if I say those wrong, but all I can also think about genuinely is Lilo and Stitch as my first exposure, and likely your first exposure if you're not, Polynesian or from Hawaii, and I'm confident in saying they were exemplifying Kahiko in the show's intro, but Aulana, goodness, in the opening song of Hawaiian Roller Coaster Ride. If there are any Polynesian individuals, please for the love of Arceus, sound out and correct me. I genuinely desire to visit Hawaii and learn the culture firsthand, just like I want to understand Ainu culture firsthand as much as possible too. There's actually a lot of cultures that are better to understand that way due to there being a lot of misinformation, and the only way I've been able to avoid it is often by looking directly at museums or educational centers that are reliable and dedicated towards this. Otherwise, even in professional settings, things have gotten really, really messy to my understanding. Now, as for Galar, its focus is on calling Jynx the Snow Queen and for her to have a beautiful and delicate voice. This might be related to English folk music, especially as it is considered a traditional style within England specifically and would be the spawning point for many other types of music. I also believe this to be the case as we get a strong antithesis to traditional singing with the more hard rock, glam rock, or shock rock style that we would see represented in Obstagoon, who in turn represents the band Kiss very directly. This is old versus new, a tale as old as time when we look at it, especially when we look at Obstagoon being partnered with Pierce, who is an outcast through his past refusal to shift his home to a Dynamax power spot. And in this capacity, we may as well talk about the rest of what Obstagoon has in store in regards to it and it being a sound Pokemon. Because more than just being a Pokemon that has been said to have adapted the best in Galar's harsh climate, this trait and other traits like its vocalizations do relate to the Eurasian or European Badger. Now, I've talked about this in previous videos, but it does turn out that the Eurasian Badger has been around for an incredibly long time due to its hardiness and ability to adapt. But they are also incredibly vocal. They're noted to have 16 distinct calls with their own unique uses. Some are to scold their babies, some are to scare away predators, and even others resemble a death scream that was noted in the past very often to actually scare hunters from going after them after they have heard what is described as a mortifying cry. Like literally, they would shoot the badger, they would hear this cry, and they'd say, "Nope, I'm done. I'm done. I'm walking away from this one. I'm not hunting them anymore. I'm sorry. I made a grave error." They're also noted to be even more vocal during a fight, engaging in noisy battles over territory or during mating seasons in particular, showing off to us why Obstagoon is one of the most perfect Pokemon to have gotten the look, behavior, and habits that it has. Lapras is probably one of the first Pokemon that came to mind when you looked at this video, assuming I didn't put it on the thumbnail. I don't think I did, and for good reason. I say I don't think I did because I draw them myself, and sometimes I draw them beforehand, sometimes I draw them after doing the recording. Either way, to keep in touch with others of its kind, Lapras sings enchanting melodies. They usually sing when they are in a good mood. Now, their Gigantamax form brings it home as an icy square of notes floats around its body now, which is a visual warning of its signature G-Max move, Kyodai Melody, or G-Max Resonance. I can feel the Soul Eater song playing in my head now. If you enjoyed that anime a decade ago, you now have it in your head too. But these songs that Lapras sings are one thing, but for it to be boosted in its G-Max form is explainable by science, once again, my dear viewer, because as it turns out, the logarithmic spiral shape actually improves sound quality. Even when we look at our own ears, we find that the cochlea is a spiral, cone-shaped thing, even being potentially described as a logarithmic spiral. This is then comparable to the spiral of a nautilus, which anything that has a spiral shell like this can detach from the shell itself, going as far then to confirm why Oleana within the games directly states that the shell on G-Max Lapras is not part of its body. Really wild stuff, really, and it's all tied to this new spiral formation that is its shell in this G-Max form. Bellossom goes back to having references towards Polynesian dancing, as it not only takes on visual inspiration, but is directly noted to dance and chant while being drawn out by warm sunlight. Although their singing goes beyond their vocal performance and extends into their petals, as when it rubs the petals on its head together, it creates a pleasing sound. There really isn't anything that directly relates to this science-wise that isn't just talking about other ways for plants to communicate, so this is a fast entry and we can move on to our next entry. Misdreavus is directly noted to be the Screech Pokemon, which takes us out of the realm of singing for sound types and takes us into Pokemon that are heavily reliant on sound to get the food, or rather sustenance, that they need. This is because Misdreavus eats the fear that is produced by those that it scares, and its most common way to scare others is by sneaking up on them and screaming as though it were a banshee, shocking them into screaming with fear. It does have other methods like yanking on people's hair, and while it says cry, as in its normal cry, it's horrifying to imagine it crying like, the witch from Left 4 Dead, and seeing this Pokemon in its place. And while there are a couple of other inspirations that goes into this Pokemon, I actually want to focus on the idea of the Banshee, which is derived from the Irish I don't know how to say that word, I realize. Benshide, I believe is how I say that. I'm gonna go with that. Meaning women of the fairies or woman of the hills. And do you know what that then relates to? Its paradox form that is a ghost fairy type, Fluttermane. And of course, Fluttermane's final move that it learns is Perish Song, driving home that this Pokemon didn't always just consume fear, but may have consumed far more in long days past. You might not exactly give it the sound Pokemon stamp of approval, but it's at least important to note that Yanmega can create shockwaves just by beating its wings. These aren't considered gale force winds or anything else, they are noted as shockwaves, which we could then relate back to sound. These shockwaves are so powerful they may inflict critical injuries on any foes or even knock down huge trees. Meanwhile, even just by looking at Yanma's info, it states it can also generate shockwaves capable of breaking glass or even launching a house skyward by flapping its wings very fast. Which seems incredibly ridiculous until you find out that this trait of launching houses directly into the air is strictly within the Legends Arceus Pokédex, which would be during a time when Foundation was not as strong and houses were made out of different materials. I will say even then though, that this has to relate to small huts or places that just weren't as permanent as we would get in the modern day. Otherwise we'd see more entries like these in the rest of the Pokédex entries, and we just don't. I have a little bit of a soft spot for Politoed, but only when I get to talk about its singing and how it relates to the Coqui of the real world, because of course the Puerto Rican has a soft spot for the Coqui frog, how can I not? Now, Politoed acts as a leader to Poliwag and Poliwhirl, but not Poliwrath, which gather from afar upon hearing its cry. Politoed likes to expand its throat and sing, and when 3 or more assemble, they sing in a chorus with a loud, bellowing voice. At nightfall, Politoed appears near lakes to make territorial claims through cries that sound like shouting. A male Politoed's cry is said to be louder than a female's, and a male Politoed with a deep, menacing voice will become more popular with the opposite gender. This loud, deep, menacing voice is very different to how the Coqui chooses their mates. In fact, the males with higher energy levels better territories, and faster rate of saying Coqui are the most attractive to them. It's completely unrelated to pitch, it turns out. And of course, I can't talk about the Coqui without letting you hear it, so here you go, have a little Coqui cry right now. The Coqui that can stand out despite the grand chorus of males trying to call for mates are the Coqui that won't be going home lonely tonight, which, to clarify, yes, their peak calling is between dusk and midnight. Now, Politoed is about as closely related to the Coqui as any Pokemon currently gets, though its cry is again in opposite to the Coqui, as it is wholly unpleasant to the human ear according to Pokédex entries. And I was about to lovingly talk about this frog in Florida and how I've seen it there growing up, but it turns out they were so invasive that they even survived an eradication of their species, but are kept in check by general environmental factors that prevent them from spreading further than nurseries or greenhouses where they are currently typically found. The Department of Land and Natural Resources also notes that their vocalizations can reach up to 95 decibels, which is louder than a hairdryer, but just a little quieter than a car horn about 16 feet away. Mind you, this is their chorus, not a singular one, technically speaking. OSHA itself does note that 90 decibels is the limit for workplaces before you would need hearing protection devices, meaning these guys are pretty freaking loud. Also, not gonna lie, I'm in a little bit of a shock from this, not in a bad way, but just like all this information coming together blindsided me. Like, I never thought of them as an invasive species. I just grew up with them and thought, oh, that's a cute little frog. Oh, it makes cute little noises. Oh, I'm Puerto Rican, so of course I love these frogs. Like, cool. But man, that is wild to find out. Now, before we move on to Ludicolo's ability to dance at infinitum, I just want to say thank you for watching. You've already buckled down to listen this far to a video that's over an hour long, so you should be sure to subscribe, as all my videos are deep dives of similar, if not longer length, typically. Let me know your favorite quote-unquote sound Pokemon. We have yet to reach one of mine, but when we do, I'll make it pretty obvious, as I even have a little plush of them waiting to be shown, sitting on my desk right now. This helps a lot, as not only comments, but also hyping the video and sharing it helps the reach, while likes let me know you want more videos like this. Lastly, I want to say thank you to members of the channel and Patreon for supporting the channel. If you want monthly insiders, early access to videos, and members exclusive videos, become a member for as little as $3 a month. It goes a long way, and I cover topics I normally wouldn't in my main videos. But enough of all that. Once again, thank you for watching, and on with the video. Ludicolo becomes more powerful when it hears festive music and will appear near laughing children on hikes. The reason is due to structures in Ludicolo's body that can produce energy when hit by sound waves that have a cheerful rhythm. So not only will positive energy, but also upbeat, cheerful rhythms will fill it with energy. And this brings me to my #1 energy-producing plan within the world of Pokemon. We have all of these different sound sub-type Pokemon, and so many of them create cheerful songs and dances, all while Ludicolo can produce energy on its own. And even humans can of course join in the fun too. What we need is the Eternal Music Festival, something where all sorts of Pokemon and people can constantly dance and sing, showing off their stuff, and as they do, then Ludicolo are scattered all around, enjoying the festivities as they are effectively pumped up with so much positive energy that they will never get tired, they'll never run out of energy, they'll never want to stop the party. We take these Ludicolo and create some sort of kinetic force plates, basically something that can take the impact of Ludicolo, and the energy exerted from its dancing is turned then from kinetic force into potential force or directly to energy. Don't ask me how we do this, because this is all heavy theoretical science anyway. From there though, the energy stored just continues to be used as one energy source for a region, or at least a city. An eternal Ludicolo party that is eco-friendly and will even drive up revenue as people go to the open Eternal Festival, where people can sell food, drink, and other business products at their discretion. Send me into the Pokemon world somehow, and as long as I don't die from a rogue flamethrower, I shall become the most chaotically ethical but questionable scientist known to all of mankind. What I'm also saying is that you should not give me infinite power. I won't be evil, but I will leave you scratching your head from time to time. But joking aside, Ludicolo relates back to mariachi bands, if that wasn't abundantly clear from its appearance, sombrero and all. Though more specifically, I would like to state that it relates to zapateado, rhythmic percussive footwork dancing that has been inspired by Spanish flamenco dancing. This would then tie it further into why it has such an emphasis on footwork dancing, as we would see with Tierno as a great example, even though he also aimed towards more dancing styles and practices. Last note, allow me to simp just a little bit, the wars I would fight to see my fiance in a flamenco dress. Those dresses are genuinely beautiful, and the frills are phenomenal. I know what I'm about. We've actually made it to my favorite Pokemon of all time, Whismur. Not the evolutions, get those far away from me, they're ugly on purpose and we'll still talk about them, but Whismur is a baby that must be protected at all times. It is weird that it does have an aux cord for a butthole though. That will never not weird me out, and you cannot deny the truth, for that is what the hole is. They're easily frightened by loud noises, and while their murmurs are still barely audible, when it senses danger, it will let out an ear-splitting cry as loud as a jet plane taking off. This would place it between 120 and 150 decibels, putting it above the pain threshold of 110, and would cause immediate permanent hearing damage if you didn't have any form of hearing protection. And if you just thought to yourself, oh, I'll just make sure it never cries by being very careful, here's the thing. The sounds that it normally makes, and there it goes, when not murmuring, is clocked in at 100 decibels, and we already talked about how bad that is for our hearing. To make matters worse then, it gets scared by its own sounds and cries, making it cry even louder like a toddler when you shake it too hard. For legal reasons, that is a joke. Please do not shake your toddlers or babies or children in general. You can cause harm to them by doing that. I may talk about drop-kicking children in my streams here and there, but nothing is more important to me than to protect animals and children as they are innocent in my eyes. Now, excuse me while I go throw one out of a window. Now, Whismur isn't going to be like your baby when it cries. It can breathe through its ear canals, which then allows it to cry continually without ever stopping until it either falls asleep from exhaustion or until its ear covers are shut. In other words, the Pokédex is telling you to momentarily suffocate it so it can stop crying. Funnily enough, your ears, nose, and throat are all connected. This personally bothers me a decent amount, as after brushing my teeth, I swear I can feel the minty freshness in my ears, and that is something I just do not talk about, I realize. Not to my fiance, not to my family, not to my friends. It doesn't hurt, it's just a really weird feeling. Though to finalize Whismur's habits, they also live in caves. You know, places that compound and project sound even more, potentially even amplifying it depending on the shape of the cave. This is both hilarious and horrifying because of places like Whismur Cave in Hoenn that have nothing but Whismur inside of them unless you look under rocks, because their sounds have driven out all other species that would otherwise normally live there. Now, its evolution, Loudred is able to shout at high volumes by inhaling, then exhaling using powerful stomach muscles. Additionally, its round ears serve as loudspeakers, and it will stomp its feet to build power. Its powerful voice can tip trucks, splinter wooden houses, and blow away its opponents, but it will be temporarily deaf when it finishes shouting. Not only is it loud enough through heavy contraction of stomach muscles, but through amplification. It's so dangerous that it actually affects itself, which makes me wonder if their mating rituals are anything like the white bellbird. As a mini tangent, the white bellbird can reach 125 decibels with its song, which of course it uses to attract mates. The call is described as strange and metallic, almost as if blacksmiths are trying to compete as they hammer against their anvils. And when they are attracting mates, they will direct the song precisely at them, putting them at risk of going deaf. And to top it all off, their stomachs are apparently washboard-like, ripped and muscly, which is all that's effectively keeping their bodies together despite the sheer power of their calls. Their calls have been documented to be as loud as pile drivers and to be heard a mile away. And then we come back to Loudred, who instead of having visible abs, is just this barrel-chested individual that is likely plenty muscle, which explains why their attack and special attack base stats are actually equal, and this even carries true as it evolves into Exploud. Now, Exploud uses the tubes on its body to draw in air and increase its noise-based attacks. Its bellowing is capable of triggering earthquakes and can be heard from over 6 miles away. While it only raises its voice when it's in battle, it can also communicate its feelings to others by producing whistle-like sounds. In the past, Exploud was used by distant cities as a way of communication. I tried to find a good comparison animal or item, but honestly, knowing that they can be heard from like one city to another is probably enough. It helps that their heads are kind of shaped like pipe organs as well, which even though they breathe through it, might also help us explain how they amplify the sound to some capacity. I just feel bad for whoever's using them to communicate with the other cities. Like, do they just designate someone who is deaf to man these Pokemon, or do they sacrifice someone's hearing for this? These are the important questions that need to be answered. While Wailord doesn't actually make note of its calls, and I wouldn't necessarily call it a sound Pokemon, it is a baleen whale, with these massive beauties being noted to reach 230 decibels with their calls. Take that and the knowledge that the sound travels better within water, 4.3 times faster in room temperature water to be exact, and you have a call that can travel so much further. Baleen whales are known for their extremely loud vocalizations, and this loudness allows them to communicate over long distances with sounds like moans and rumbles that can travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers underwater. For example, the blue whale produces low-frequency moans that can be detected from a great distance, while the fin whale emits loud, low-frequency pulses that are often used for reproductive displays, a little mating ritual all over again. These sounds are crucial for their long-distance communication, navigation, and mating, of course. Now, we could include Cetitan into this. It is a terrestrial whale, having decided to return back to the land after its ancestors went to the water, which, if I remember correctly, literally, creatures went on land, didn't like it there, went back to the water, became whales over centuries, thousands of years, whatever, you know what I mean, hopefully. And then Cetitan's ancestors sat down and said, nah, I don't like it here again, we're going back. Though I will say, Cetitan's call will still not assumedly travel as far since it's not underwater, though I doubt that its call wouldn't be just as devastating. For note, since I didn't say it with Explode as well, it is noted that at about 185 decibels, that acute organ damage is expected to happen. Not just organs within the ear. The body ruptures from this level of pressure. This is because sound is nothing more than a wave of pressure passing through the air or water, or, solid objects if you're in the way. They're no better than vibrations of all the atoms that exist in the distance between us and the source of the sound. So make something loud enough and sound could effectively kill us through intense vibrations, maybe even literally cause us to boom. Which is something that we could kind of compare to what we see in like movies and stuff, with big concussive blasts that you would see as a result from a large explosion. So take your pick as to how you want to visualize that. Despite being a ninja, Ninjask in particular still takes after its Cicada inspirations, and you could slip in a little sound typing there. If it is not trained properly, Ninjask will refuse to obey its trainer and cry loudly. Due to this, it is said to put the trainer's abilities to the test, and hearing its loud cries for too long induces a headache. Now, cicadas are, of course, well known for the sounds that they make, the droning buzz they call out with, especially on the hottest of summer days, being iconic even. Also, if I wasn't clear, part of this video is really just to talk about the sound-based feats of some of these Pokemon. Should all of these Pokemon be considered sound types? Probably not, but when you have a Ninjask here who learns Screech on evolution, or as a level 1 move, literally appearing twice on its natural move list as a reference to cicadas and their screeching, it's hard to ignore its attachment to sound and the possibility of people making Fakemon, for example, more inclined towards making it boisterous and loud rather than this ninja aesthetic that it has. Though to close out this Pokemon, cicadas achieve a deafening collective 100 decibels through the vibration of their membranes, not through actual singing, though it would also then explain the headaches that Ninjask can cause due to the high decibel level. Literally called the humming Pokemon, amongst all its traits, behaviors, and especially its Mega Evolution, it is impossible to deny Altaria fits into our sound type subcategory. It gracefully glides through the clouds, often while singing or humming in a soprano voice. Its voice seems to have special properties that induce a dreamy state for listeners. Altaria can be very affectionate, enveloping people it is bonded with in its cotton-like wings and humming them to sleep. While normally kind, they can attack foes with shrill cries without mercy if provoked. Even further than this, Mega Altaria's singing voice is even more beautiful than its regular form. By singing its beautiful melodies, Mega Altaria's crystal clear voice can make its listeners experience a dreamy wonderment. You can break down its name to alto and aria, both relating back to music. Alto being noted to be rich and warm, and then the next step up being soprano, noted as the highest vocal range of all types. An aria as well is a self-contained piece for one voice, with or without instrumental or orchestral accompaniment, normally part of a larger work. It also means air, which matches our cloudy friend here, whose feathers, while strong enough to apparently lift a dump truck, according to Legends ZA notes, is mostly full of air and is revealed to be as such when wet, as it just kind of slops into like this weird gummy looking mess. What catches my interest though is its change to now be a dragon fairy Pokemon. Maybe the idea is that song is so intrinsically tied to love and life that it would then be attributed to some fairy Pokemon as well. And something that is seemingly common is that many sound Pokemon do fall into normal or electric types, as you might have noticed by now, or at least Pokemon that have one of those types. Of course, there are outliers like this one, but it's a strong pattern overall, and it might give us hints as to what we might see in the future for fairy-type Pokemon. Flygon is a classic. With its wings, it kicks up sandstorms to hide itself. Its wings make a singing sound when they are flapped, earning Flygon the name the Desert Spirit. It uses this unique ability to attract prey, stranding them before it attacks. The singing sound in my mind is absolutely tied to the singing sands, a rare natural phenomenon described as the following by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. These singing sands are caused by vibrations in the sand and require a combination of round sand grains, silica content, and humidity, and emit a variety of sounds. A dune can exist in a desert like the Namib Desert or on the coast of Lake Michigan in Indiana. There's a Lake Michigan in Indiana? I don't know why I didn't fully comprehend that, like when I first read it. Okay. Deserts worldwide are caused by similar patterns of wind, temperature, and moisture. It's often described as roaring, booming, squeaking, or the song of the dunes. It can reach up to 105 decibels and last several minutes. See, I would see it as a calming thing, as they do describe, or a calming sound, but thanks to the deep bass sounds I hear in like horror games, or horror in general, or like the memes that use horror shrills and stuff, this sound is just a little ruined for me. I might say that in person, it would be a different story, since sound resonates differently when recorded and replayed, and so it will sound different in person, and it might be a little bit calming then. Chingling and Chimecho are more undeniable sound Pokemon, and now Chimecho even has a Mega form to talk about. For Chingling, inside its mouth is a red orb, which creates a ringing sound as the Pokemon moves. Additionally, the orb can be vibrated to create high-frequency, long-lasting cries to deafen its opponents. These sounds produced can be too high for people to hear, yet powerful enough to give them headaches. Chingling gently bounces from place to place with each hop, making a ringing sound. It's a living bell. This is how bells work. And the high-pitched metallic sound can bother people. I'm actually one of those people, depending on how strong the metallic part of the sound is, so I often find myself preferring Furin, which is where Chimecho comes in. Chimecho's body is hollow and allows sound to echo inside. By amplifying the faint sound of wind inside its body, Chimecho can create ultrasonic sound waves and other noises, allowing it to startle and repel opponents. It uses 7 different echoing cries to communicate with others. It is an omnivorous species, eating berries that it plucks with its tail, and can even knock out large prey using powerful waves of air. I can tell you now without a doubt that it is hunting owls and bats, based on a number of reinforcing factors that I found during my ecology series, so if you want the explanation on that, go check out my Sinnoh ecology video. Additionally, Chimecho is nocturnal, tying in with the bats and the owls, and usually lives in grasslands and woods, but some are found in mountainous regions. It flies riding on winds and becomes more active during hot seasons, which all of this matches well because not only can their sounds and shine be disruptive towards flying creatures, but Furin, wind chimes, the inspiration for Chimecho, are designed to evoke a sense of coolness during hot summers while giving a tranquil melody. They're also used as talismans against bad luck, which is why we find them in places such as the Abundant Shrine where Landorus resides within Unova. When we take it to the next level, we have its Mega form. Mega Chimecho's cries have a bright and refreshing tone that soothes the hearts of trainers who hear them. These cries calm the souls of listeners and are said to have a cleansing power that wards off malice and purifies evil spirits. It can unleash powerful sonic blasts by vibrating its body to disrupt its opponent's minds and break their spirits. Anyone struck by the sound will feel detached from reality and experience memory loss, sometimes losing track of what they were doing or who they are. Even if an opponent manages to win in this state, the sound of shattering glass that resonates when Mega Chimecho falls will leave them in a state of shock. The smaller copies of Mega Chimecho flutter endlessly, even when no wind is blowing. When Mega Chimecho cries, its copies join in and resonate with it. These echoes overlap and reverberate to create an intense sound wave attack that can overwhelm any opponent. which this whole entry is wild, but is easily related to the Cicada, taking on a similar golden appearance and being used by Buddhist monks to scare away animals and evil spirits. Of course, the massive gold part is itself a Chingling in design, and its ability to attack in all directions is just because sound moves in a circular pattern effectively. Lastly, I couldn't find a catch-all ring of Furin, unfortunately, but considering this is something that would have been popularized in the Edo period, and this is a little bit of a stretch, but would also explain why it came back in ZA, Hisui takes place at the end of the Edo period, and ends as it gets into the Meiji Restoration period, and Irida has the same color scheme we see in the red and white cloth on top. It seems like his design may be a minor reference and inspiration to Irida and Legends Arceus. If it's not, then it's just a strong coincidence since it already had these colors as part of its design. The singing of crickets breaks the silence of the air as Cricketod gather in the splendor of autumn, conducted by the maestro that is Cricketune. Now, I could leave it at that because it's the most to-the-point information I could give, but we both know I can't do just that. By shaking its head and rubbing its antennae together, Cricketod is able to create a sound similar to a xylophone or marimba that it uses to communicate with others of its kind. Cricketod are known to gather in greater numbers during autumn nights. This is just something that lines up really well with real-life crickets looking to get their mating game on. Because as I like to say, everything in their goals boils down to eat, breed, die. Or at least instead of saying breed, because the internet ruined that, we have the new Eat, Spawn, Die shirts now available on Teespring, alongside a number of other designs that you can check out. Clothe your filthy body with my apparel and support the channel. I'm joking. You're beautiful, but if you legitimately want some merch, that's where you can get it. It's probably linked in a comment, and if it's not there, then I didn't do my job, and you could probably see it right under the video. I don't know. But for Cricketune, this Pokemon's arms are shaped similar to its antennae and are crossed over its chest when it cries. By rubbing its arms together, Cricketune can produce sounds and improvise melodies. It can also allow its cry to resonate in its belly. Cricketune's melodies vary greatly between individuals and can be used to signal its emotions. Scientists have been observing the melodic patterns of Cricketune for studies, and in one village, they are used in a contest based on the different sounds that they make. So on one hand, you have xylophones and marimbas. On the other hand, you have the violin or viola as it puts its arms up, but then can go into a cello or even bass when you think about Alpha Cricketune as it rubs its belly. I personally have a violin amongst many other instruments. I also would play it, but I genuinely don't think my microphone would pick up the sound well, and I have not practiced in over a year. Maybe one day during a stream I'll give it a shot, but these guys are simple. Crickets, but instruments. Choir clothing slapped onto them, and conductor clothing slapped onto them. They were built from the very beginning to be sound Pokemon. Bronzong was once worshipped as a deity that would bring great harvests, and when it would ring, it was known to open portals or even summon rain down. The greatest thing is that Rain Dance is its final move, something I would not have expected if I hadn't looked into it for one of my most recent videos. More than this though, its entire body is shaped like a bell, and it rings like a bell of course, so it is a bell. But we don't exactly know where it comes from because in places like Galar, it's directly stated to have come from a different region and have been known to sleep for up to 2,000 years, so we don't even know what society may have actually made them if a society of humans made them. As it turns out though, Bulbapedia does have it right on the money in terms of its inspirations. Bronzong is based on a Dotaku, Japanese bells which were believed to have been used to pray for good harvests. They are often decorated with patterns representing nature and were buried, occasionally with bronze mirrors and weapons in isolated locations. Bronzong and the fact that it evolves from Bronzor also seems to be based on an old Japanese myth present in the book Kwaidan, Stories and Studies of Strange Things by Lefkadio Hearn. The priests of Mugen-yama wanted to forge a bell for their temple, so they asked the local women to donate their bronze mirrors for this purpose. Bronzor, Bronzong. A woman contributed her mirror, but later regretted it. Because of her repentance, the mirror wouldn't melt in the furnace until she took her own life. Though before this final act, she said that whoever would break the bell would be given great wealth by her ghost. A multitude of people tried to break the bell by ringing it furiously, so the tired priests rolled it down a hill into a swamp in frustration. And as such, Bronzong's Pokedex entry in Diamond may refer to the Kamiwakura site, where multiple Dotaku were discovered during the construction of a farm road in 1996 by a heavy machinery operator, who accidentally struck the cache of Dotaku while excavating the site and dated to approximately 2,000 years ago in the Yayoi period. Additionally, Bronzong's facial features resemble those of the Mesoamerican rain god Tlaloc, who is often depicted as being predominantly cyan in color, and in Mexico City, which is located on the site of the former capital of the Aztec Empire, artifacts are often discovered during construction-related excavation. Such a massively unassuming Pokemon that has an incredible amount of deep lore to it, and yet it's hardly ever talked about. It makes me wonder if there's like anyone out of you in the audience right now with Bronzong as your favorite, and if any of these are the reasons for that. Chatot is literally called the music note Pokemon. It is a lovebird with a head like an eighth note and a tail that might even be a metronome, all while being able to mimic all sorts of sounds and speech, even as far as being able to imitate human speech and copy cries of other Pokemon so perfectly as a defense mechanism, it can confuse other Pokemon into thinking that it is of their species. It also uses all the sounds it has learned and arranges them into its own melody, and flicks its tail to keep rhythm. Chatot are even capable of understanding the meaning of the words they mimic the older and more experienced that they do become. Which, now I'm imagining a bird beatboxing with the sounds of car horns and random words people say. Like, wouldn't that actually be amazing? It'd be really, really cool. But I wanted to dig into why Chatots and more openly parrots can even mimic speech and sounds, and it turns out the National Audubon Society has a complete answer for us today. Parrots can talk like humans because they have unique vocal organs called a syrinx, allowing them to mimic complex sounds. Paired with highly social, intelligent brains that mimic their flock, which might be humans even, to fit in. Lacking vocal cords, they manipulate air through the syrinx at the base of the trachea and use their tongue and beak to shape sounds with remarkable precision. Parrots are even capable of learning and using varying dialects. Yellow-naped Amazon parrots in Costa Rica, for example, have regional dialects, and when they swap regions, the transplants often pick up the local twang. Tim Wright, who studies parrot vocalization at New Mexico State University, found this in his research. Please give me a parrot with that deep Southern Belle accent, please. Now, I genuinely love birds, but I will never have birds ever again as pets or within my home. They're too much of a mess, and I need them to have their needs fulfilled through being able to fly and have big spaces for them, which I do not have that type of dedicated space. Plus, we do have 2 cats who stalk the birds outside our windows, from the inside of the house, of course, so you can imagine how that goes. We could throw Squawkabilly here as well, but it really doesn't emphasize an ability to mimic sounds at all. In fact, other than Hyper Voice and Uproar, it really doesn't do anything with sound, and the only reason it has those moves is due to the species being noted as just being incredibly boisterous and being incredibly loud. One of our nurse Pokemon, Audino, have feelers on its ears that act like stethoscopes, in that, of course, it can feel the beat of another Pokemon's heart in order to assess the Pokemon's feelings and overall physical condition. The feelers are also able to determine when an egg is close to hatching, and it does have overall an incredible sense of hearing, where it can even hear a pebble rolling away from a mile away. Knowing that its feelers act in this way, in turn, stethoscopes in real life enhance body sounds by converting skin vibrations into acoustic pressure waves, which are then transmitted through hollow, flexible tubes to the person's, or rather the user's, ears. The chest piece uses a diaphragm for high-frequency sounds, or a bell for low-frequency sounds, to pick up vibrations and focus them, amplifying these sounds that are otherwise too faint to hear. So as we've kind of talked about earlier, there's a frequency for every sound, affecting how we hear it. It's not about lower frequencies being harder to hear and higher frequencies being easier. There's an overall range that humans and other creatures are able to hear. In fact, many animals communicate in what is called infrasonic, too low, or ultrasonic, too high, frequency sounds for us to hear, while also being in ranges that predators may not be able to easily catch. So in this sense, rather than having to constantly be attached, it just has a higher sensitivity towards different pressure waves, which allows it to further hear, understand, and diagnose, as this nurse Pokemon tends to do. And thanks to its amazing hearing, it is able to avoid predators and fighting, since it is more of a pacifist Pokemon. And yet here you are, using them as XP bags. Shame. I originally did not plan to include bats at all, because these basic forms of communication or sensing surroundings through things like echolocation is just, again, basic. rather than a true feat of sound. But then Swoobat comes swinging in, being able to shake its tail vigorously, which somehow allows it to produce stronger sounds that are powerful enough to destroy concrete. I don't know if it's compressing something in its body and then causing higher pressures for it to release or what. But to put that into perspective, force is force at the end of the day. Floor is made of floor. The big point of difference is where the point of contact is, how contact is being made, what the surface area is, and how much force is being used on an object. This is why sometimes a knife stabbing is more effective than a punch. You can punch a fly out of the air and you might just stun it because it has such a small body. You're not hitting it with all the force of your fist, you're kind of just hitting it with like your finger. Even though I could punch someone and break a bone depending on where I punch them. But in this case, sound is going to hit a decently wide surface area thanks to its circular pattern of movement, technically conical if you want to talk about it that way. Assuming Swoobat isn't just shotgunning the concrete by having its nose pressed directly against it, but even then, this is incredibly impressive. As one more fun fact, remember that the amount of force any creature outputs is also the force that it has to be able to withstand, which would possibly make it so Swoobat isn't right up against whatever it's shotgunning. The greatest example I can think of to help explain this is the T-Rex, who has an incredible bite force and needs its massive noggin to be able to withstand the sheer force that it outputs, because when there is an output of force, there is an opposite, often equal force being placed on the object or creature outputting that force. So long story short, its skull has been able to withstand the car-crushing force its teeth can output because the skull will feel that pressure and has become thicker to withstand it. And this then explains in the most basic way why so many Pokemon are very specially built and hyper durable. High special attack, high special defense, which that's not universal, of course. Tympole vibrates its cheeks to create a sound too high-pitched for humans and other species of Pokemon to hear. The sounds are used in rhythm to communicate with others of its kind, particularly for warning of danger. They are known to sing in high-pitched voices, which creates graceful ripples on the water's surface. Once again, there are a lot of musical references in this Pokemon. Timpani, tympanum, and then in Japanese it's called otamoro, which immediately made me think of an automaton, which, yes, I have one of those somewhere around here. Actually, let me go grab it. This thing is old. I think it goes back as far as like 2018 when I was in college and I was just having a horrible time. And I started obsessing over automaton videos that were all over the internet for a while, which then I bought an automaton on a whim. And no, it doesn't work. I don't have the batteries in here. I haven't had working batteries in this in a while, so you don't have to worry about this goofy thing making any sound. But if you know a violin or how to play a violin, especially a violin, mandolin, technically viola, any of those things, really, it's super easy to actually pick up if you wanted a goofy instrument. I'm not sponsored. Yeah. But this does lead to the tie that otamajakushi, if I even said that word right, is the word used for tadpoles and music notes, with even the otama translating directly to ladle, which, you know, the shape of the ladle and the music note are roughly the same. All while Tympole kind of has ladles or notes for eyebrows. Its evolutions get more into vibrations through their lumps rather than singing, so that's a gray area on if you would consider them potential sound Pokemon as well. I'll leave that one to you. I have grown to love Maractus so much over time, finding out it's a keystone species, knowing it's just this cheerful little single-stage Pokemon, and then of course now throwing it into being a sound subtype is really fun because it literally is just a mariachi cactus. Its name in Japanese is even literally Marakachi, slamming mariachi and maraca together, and it was really awkward to say. And simply put though, when Maractus moves its body rhythmically, it emits sounds reminiscent of maracas being played. This allows Maractus to produce up-tempo songs and dances that it can use to scare away predators. I'll point you towards the Keystone Species video if you want more on all this Pokemon and how wonderful it is and how vital it is through and through, and I'll move on to our next entry instead. This list would never be complete without the mythical Pokemon of Song and the thumbnail Pokemon itself. Now that I've actually drawn the thumbnail, the melody Pokemon, Meloetta. In Aria form, Meloetta can sing beautiful songs. According to Artisan Unova, Meloetta's beautiful music and dance inspired many works of art, music, and songs. This made the Pokemon popular among both musicians and dancers. Meloetta's melody has a special vocalization method and can control the feelings of those who hear it. It can make both humans and Pokemon feel happy or sad through this method. The song can also unseal ancient ruins, such as the Abyssal Ruins. Now, at least within the manga, it is shown that Meloetta can forget this song, which, as we can see in the Pokédex, it will leave the world full of sorrow, and through this, it loses its full power and cannot access its pure white form whenever the song is lost. In the pure white form, it can perform graceful dances instead of singing. This form of Meloetta can captivate anyone who watches its enchanting dance steps. Now, Meloetta's song can also be channeled to summon and control the original 3 forces of nature in connection with the reveal glass. However, this process can cause Meloetta agonizing pain in the process. Now, considering the ties between dances and singing that we get in Bellossom, in Sunny Day, Bronzong, and Rain Dance, and any other ties you might find between song, dance, and weather, it seems clear that song and dance do hold power over nature and weather itself, and isn't just a belief or long-standing belief that has been found throughout cultures in the real world. With Meloetta here sealing the deal with its forced dominion over 3 of the genies, though I would even argue it could hold power over Enamorus, our 4th genie, as well. After all, song and dance is a common practice used to attract mates and even woo your own partner in life. But music and dance is not meant to control these things. It's meant to simply bring gratefulness to the gods, is what Pokemon is trying to say within their world. To force these things to bend to the will of emotion is too much and shouldn't be done. And this might be something that I need to explore more in the future, because this is, or it might be, an incredible hidden story that Pokemon has been trying to tell us. Gourgeist is a bit iffy if you'd include it here, but at the very least it is known to wander the streets on nights of full moons, singing an eerie song. Those who do hear it will then be cursed. This could have been applied to just about any other ghost Pokemon, as there are tons of different stories of lost souls wandering the world, singing ghostly songs. I'm pretty sure these are most common when it comes to ghosts rumored to exist on the high seas, but don't quote me on that. It's a fairly common trope at the end of the day, at least in my eyes. Noibat is capable of emitting any kind of wavelength of sound, including ultrasonic waves up to 200,000 hertz. No wavelength is beyond its ability to emit. It uses these waves to stun large creatures, communicate with other Noibat, and immobilize their prey. It also uses ultrasonic waves to perceive its surroundings, allowing it to fly in the dark. It is very fond of fruits and uses its sonar to detect its ripeness, which you can actually see in the Pokemon Snap game for the Switch. Which this makes me realize that the only bat Pokemon that aren't included here now are the Zubat line, Lunala, and I suppose Gliscor if you want to consider it a bat, even though it has a lot of other mixing inspirations going on for it. Now, as per that entry stating that Noibat can reach up to 200,000 hertz, that is the frequency used by marine mammals like our whales and dolphins. Of course, these are beyond human hearing, and even normal bats can only hear up to 120,000. So this puts Noibat far above the norm and into the peak and beyond. As for Noivern, it doesn't really expand beyond this, but it does have the capacity to produce ultrasonic waves that are strong enough to shatter large boulders, which is something we've already just discussed with Swoobat. Originally, Pyroar's signature ability was Noble Roar, which is directly translated from Japanese as War Cry, and is a sound-based move that raises physical and special attack by 1 stage. This is more of an honorable mention than anything in my opinion, but I got bullied by chat a little bit to try and include it. But how about we get some lion roar facts in from the World Wildlife Fund? Leading males defend their territory by marking it with urine and roaring to scare off intruders. A lion's roar can be heard from 5 miles away, and is also a show of power between males. The sad part is that lion population is in decline and is expected to continue declining without proper conservation efforts. So even when we look at an animal that is supposed to be the king, we find ourselves in a world where they may be struggling and need our help. It's something to consider regarding all animals actually, that conservation goes beyond just helping them stabilize, but continuing to protect them as we live alongside them in the same world. Just some food for thought. The entire Popplio line should also be no surprise to find here, as the complete purpose of it is to continue to hone their skills as singers as they evolve. What I've never talked about is that while it seems to only be making bubbles, remember that bubbles are filled with air, showing the sheer lung capacity of our Pokemon and allowing it and its evolutions to take full advantage of their muscle strength for singing. Its signature ability is even Liquid Voice, allowing all sound-based moves to become water-type moves as it capitalizes on the idea of sound traveling better through water. Though Brionne is more focused on its performance as a dancer, it is still creating water balloons and working through strengthening its muscles, likely a lot of its core muscles, all as it reaches its final form in Primarina. Whereas this Pokemon uses water balloons and its voice as its main weapons. Because its voice is instrumental in battle strategy, its care should be a priority for trainers. The melody it uses has been passed down for generations. Water balloons are released as it dances and are controlled by Primarina's voice, and in the moonlight, the balloons glitter and create a beautiful scene. However, some of these balloons are explosive and triggered by touch. This theatrical Pokemon considers every battle a stage and uses the non-explosive balloons as platforms to tease opponents. Imagine then all the air and the perfect amount of pressure within the bubble being kept inside, only for it to pop and then all of it to then release like a floating, well, I would say sea mine, but that already does float, but in the air mine. Those don't exist, not to my knowledge. This is the essential idea behind these bubbles. It's not just creating them with air, it's singing into them, and somehow the bubble is holding the released force of pressure from Primarina's body within the bubble itself before then exploding. Cartoon logic. Of course then, Sparkling Aria and its Z-move Oceanic Operetta, better called in Japanese Sea God Symphonia, is the peak of this power. The idea from starting as a solo in an aria and then finishing with a symphonia, which means sounding together, concord, or harmony, is a phenomenal hidden meaning and makes me think that this is even further a reference to potentially Goku's Spirit Bomb even more, a move that relies on the power of all those willing to give their energy, though instead of that, it seems as though Primarina is drawing upon the energy of all those that were all inspired by its performance. Also, I just recently found out that Lucario in the Mystery of Mew movie was voiced by Goku's voice actor, which threw me way off. He also voiced Cyrus, which, God, that's really weird to think about. In the English versions, that is. Oricorio is one I went back and forth on for a while since its main focus is dancing, though with some of the dances and forms, vocalization is very important as part of the dance. In the case of our Oricorio quartet, the only one directly noted to sing is the Pau style. The only reason we know this is through the book that James reads within the anime that states as it sings and dances, its psychic power gets stronger and stronger. This lines up nicely with what we've learned regarding Polynesian traditional and modern dancing and is a very quick entry to note. Another easy entry is the entirety of the Kommo-o line, more specifically Kommo-o itself being the loudest of the line as it's very important for their species. Kommo-o scales can be used to generate offensive sound waves, in addition to serving as a coat of natural armor. Because it does not wish to fight weak foes, it clings its scales together when it senses someone approaching. This is intended to frighten off weak or cowardly opponents. It also swings the scales on its tail to threaten any enemies it sees. Upon finishing off its prey, it will let out a victory howl. Additionally, the metallic sounds made by its comrades celebrating can also be heard all around the area the group is in. The tail itself relates back to the Kakara we had spoken of with Chimecho's Mega form, though it's even more obvious now considering the shape and arrangement of the gold scales on its tail and its use of it. Honestly, the Pokemon itself as a whole feels like it has a Buddhist aesthetic to it with the scales and everything, though I can't quite place anything more concrete and it's more of a feeling than anything. Though more than this, its signature move, Clangorous Soul or Soul Beat, is noted to raise all stats through sacrifice of health. It doesn't have any flavor text given to it, but seems to be a sort of balancing act, a gift to then receive blessing, like a tithe or donation. The Z-move Clangorous Soul Blaze, or Blazing Soul Beat, takes this further by attacking with full force and then boosting Kommo-o's stats once again, very much like a sacrifice, but I would argue it's more akin to the idea of the Asura, basically demons, not always in the evil sense, but in the violence sense, as they destroy the things that block the path to enlightenment. These individuals can be good or evil, but nevertheless they are often demigods, something that would match incredibly well with its partial inspiration, the Mo-o, a shape-shifting Hawaiian dragon that guards fish ponds, streams, and waterfalls, although they are more commonly depicted as being female, or solely female actually. As such, you could try to compare Salazzle to being a parallel, more selfish version of the Kommo-o. Otherwise, the whole idea of it being a demigod seems to match up really well with the fact that this Pokemon, being Kommo-o, is a pseudo-legendary, giving us a lot of small ties to look for. As much as I would love to talk about the entirety of the Grookey and Fuecoco lines again, I just recently covered them in my video explaining the lore of every starter Pokemon. I did talk about Poplio's line because I didn't realize some of that information when I made that video, and I would rather point you towards that video because it will give you so much more information regarding our starter Pokemon. We even had speculation at the end regarding the Winds and Wave starters and what they might evolve into based on a lot of cultural analysis that I was able to dig into. Gossifleur is a Pokemon known to be very cute while also using its voice to charm others into helping raise it. It will sing joyous songs while traveling, and that's all it needs to convince others to help. There's nothing that explains if this is an ability or some sort of hypnosis, but knowing that its evolution is important for spreading all kinds of seeds throughout the regions that they exist in, it isn't surprising that it would try to use its charm to appeal to any and all creatures that can help it, so that in turn, it can provide to the creatures everywhere that it goes. Another big one is here as Toxtricity jams on what looks like an air guitar until you look closer. By clawing at the organs on their chests, both forms of Toxtricity can generate over 15,000 volts of electricity, as well as sound. The sounds they make resemble those of electric string instruments, a standard guitar for amped form, and a bass guitar for low-key form. Toxtricity chugs stagnant water to absorb the dissolved toxins, which it then breaks down in order to generate electricity. Toxtricity is very popular with several youths who admire the way it listlessly picks fights with any foe it faces and keeps its cool no matter what. Also, yes, to clarify, stagnant water is actually very dangerous. It ends up basically boiling down to the nutrients are being kept in one place, a lot of sediment built up, and then if there's phosphorus or an excessive amount of it in that area, it's getting trapped in the sediment. So then what happens is when it rains, all of that phosphorus gets released, and then the cyanobacteria will then just feast on it, get huge algal blooms from there, and then that becomes incredibly toxic, creating even this, what is called a death column, where basically nothing lives. There's less oxygen, there's fish that are dying in the area, there are no plants, it is rough. That is something that I had to study very closely for 2 years, and it feels really good to talk about that in a video. Now, amped form Toxtricity are known to be short-tempered and extremely confident. This form aggressively attacks anything that makes eye contact with it. And as mentioned in its sleep-style decks, amped form Toxtricity occasionally strums its chest protrusion while it sleeps. If one hears intense guitar music at night, it is said to be the sound of a half-asleep amped form Toxtricity. Low-key form Toxtricity are known to be selfish and dismissive of others and have high regard towards their strength. This form taunts its opponents into fighting it when making eye contact with them, and according to its sleep-style decks, low-key form Toxtricity have been observed acting like it is strumming a musical instrument while it sleeps. It is speculated that this form of Toxtricity dreams of being on a stage, performing with rhythmic bass guitar sounds while generating electricity. Then, from here, it all comes to a head with a literal massive electric guitar that it uses in its G-Max form to attack foes, pulling off an intense guitar smash. This is like a massive adrenaline rush parallel, as the reason for it acting this way is because poison it holds in its body has seeped into its brain and caused it to go berserk. The energy and momentum of this is said to be powerful enough to create a giant crater, which feels like a no-duh considering it is a G-Max Pokemon. They're huge. Also, video about Pokemon brains would go hard. Slowpoke would be in there, this Pokemon would be in there, Alakazam would be in there. I feel like there's a good chunk of Pokemon I could swing into that and teach people about the brain. But Pete Townsend of The Who, the band, not the World Health Organization, is credited as a British singer that popularized the guitar smash in this way, giving us an easy inspiration for why our British lizard here performs this destructive act of power. Mr.Rime's Tap Dancing is something that I would argue is more than just dancing, and that tap dancing itself is also about the sounds that are made. That's why tap dancers have special shoes that emphasize the sound of their steps to really put awe within the audience as they hear the speed and skill at which they move. I also almost included the rest of the line here, but I realized that they all have soundproof as an ability because they are inspired by mimes and Charlie Chaplin, all relating to the idea of mimes being silent and Charlie Chaplin being a revolutionary silent film actor, filmmaker, composer, and editor. Quickly moving on to our semi-finale, which is a short one in the form of Revavroom and its noise pollution. Revavroom typically attaches itself to rocks that resemble the wheels and the body of a wagon, which it uses as a means of locomotion, moving around. It can create gas by combining the minerals in the rocks with its poison, and the gas is then detonated in its cylinders to generate energy for itself. This aggressive Pokemon uses the sounds of its exhaust to threaten foes. Noise pollution itself is defined as noise above 65 decibels, becoming more harmful at higher numbers, as we've discussed. Though this harm is done towards more than just humans, but also animals, and I would even say plants, as they do perceive these vibrations. Noise like this does have a massive effect on the overall health of individuals, which can be broken down to simply having too much noise to comfortably fall asleep and stay asleep without disruption, or even relaxing, as some sources like to state that it might induce a state of fight or flight when you hear a car engine turn on, the pop of an exhaust, so on and so forth. And as such, vehicles play a big part in noise pollution overall. And of course, our finale is DJ Rotom, Stereo Rotom, a Rotom appearing within Pokopia that we know has had this stereo built just for it, because Rotom can't just take over any electrical object, but rather needs special mechanisms within equipment for them to actually take over. Otherwise, they can typically enter TVs and other objects to just reside within and consume the plasma from. In this case, then, our electric normal Pokemon was given this form. It even has its direct translation name being Age Rotom, being slang for excited. This is because within Pokopia, as humanity was preparing for the end of the apocalypse, or rather, the apocalypse in general, they had to mine for countless resources for their plans. Unfortunately, when Pokemon were left behind, this Rotom was left within a closed-off cave, waiting for people to return. Though I know for a fact that it wasn't here since the start of the apocalypse, but was rather one of the first Pokemon to reappear thanks to some very special details throughout the game. This Pokemon really does seal the deal on normal and electric being the types that sound would be best represented by, if we don't consider all the other examples that we've had all these years. But if you want to know more about DJ Rotom, then I highly recommend you check out my most recent video on how I solved Pokopia, and as a big ecology nerd, I had a blast, alongside actually beating the game itself, which I have been playing here and there on my own. But what are your thoughts? Are there any Pokemon you think I should have included? Any additional fun facts that you'd like to share? Leave a comment below, and every week, one of our best comments gets highlighted. In this case, Taylor had shared that Eevee's final move, being Last Resort, which translates to the best, is in fact a reference to the saying of saving the best for last, and I have no idea how I managed to miss that when we were going through, or rather I was going through, my video on the hidden lore of final Pokemon moves, and it's amazing. If you enjoyed this, drop that like, hype the video, share the channel around. It all helps the channel immensely, as especially sharing the channel is the best way to help it grow. Finally, thank you to members who you see on this screen here once more for your extra support. If you want behind the scenes info, early access to videos, and members exclusive videos, like the one released this week on real life science inspired by Pokemon and my ranking of all the evil teams, become a member for as little as $3 a month. You are getting hours of additional content. But with that then, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time.